welcome to Hard Hats and Headspace. This week we're going to be talking to Nick O'Shea, and his strapline on LinkedIn said that construction needs more than hard hats to protect minds, and I couldn't agree more. So I want to talk to him. He's been a construction leader across many years, working for as many of the people I know across the sector. So it'd be interesting to catch up with him on what he's got to tell us about working for them, but more importantly, what he is trying to aim to achieve, and should be good. So enjoy. Let's go. Welcome back to Hard Hats and Headspace. I've got a great guest today, Nick O'Shea. He's joining us. We're going to talk about the world of construction work and a bit about mental health and getting better and looking after each other, hopefully. This is something I'm really keen on, a big part of my life and my day job. Not that many people know or see what I do. But Nick, welcome to the show, and please tell us more about you. How come you got here today?
First of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, and it's really good to see someone, in your position and in a leadership role sort of taking this stuff seriously. And the reason we connected was I saw some posts on LinkedIn, saw what you were doing, and I thought it massively aligned with what I'm doing. So a bit about myself is I'm a construction manager, I'm a podcaster, a workshop facilitator. I'm also a recovering drug addict and alcoholic. And what I do that now is I sort of go around to various different construction sites and talk about what I think is quite a big issue in the industry, which is addiction, specifically in the workplace and specifically on construction sites. A bit of background, I sort of started out working for a company called Clipvine, which I'm sure if you've ever worked in the industry, you'll have heard of.
Yeah.
As a labourer. Yes. And I worked my way up through sort of various different main contractors and did a bit of a management apprenticeship. And I kind of worked my way up into the position that I'm in today. And the reason that I do what I do was I was on site once and somebody come in and they were doing a sort of mental health talk, and it was about addiction. And they were sitting there talking about the facts and figures and all of the stuff that happens. And I was sitting there going, I'm a recovering drug addict and alcoholic, and I don't actually relate to this. How does that work out, So I kind of started going around and sharing my story. And what I think that I'm responsible for my own issues, when it comes to drugs and alcohol. But I do think that construction and the industry and the culture definitely played a part in probably facilitating my drinking and using. So I guess what I'm trying to do now is kind of go around and sort of break that stigma and talk about it. I'm covered in tattoos. I work on site. I relate to the people on site, and I try and just go in there and be like brutally honest about, my experiences in hope that it'll help someone else. So I guess that's kind of how I've ended up here today.
Yeah, well, it is fabulous, right? That you have the tenacity to go and do it, right? Because it's hard. I keep getting, since I got diagnosed a year ago with depression, right? People keep coming and say, "Oh, it's really brave of you to come out and say this." I'm like, is it? No, but it is clearly, because everyone thinks it is, and they wouldn't do it. But for me, it was like, I've been through this thing. I know loads of people in our sector that are going through it and won't talk to people or don't have the opportunity to talk to people and get help. So when you got in touch and I looked at your LinkedIn page and made a bit of a chat, I was like, man after my own heart here.
No, I agree. I think that there's a stigma around mental health in the industry, not just, what I'm talking about with drug and alcohol addiction, but there's also a thing of like, I think there's a problem with responsibility hoarding and people kind of like not willing to put their hand up and say, I've actually got way too much on at the moment. Like for example, I remember working on sites and looking after like upwards of sort of 15, 16 packages at once and really drowning, but I didn't want to be seen to say that I was drowning, because I thought, if I can't deal with it, and you touched on it before we started recording, they'll find someone else who can. And I think the real sort of industry issue kind of goes back to right the way back to when people are tendering jobs, and there's a real race to the bottom line of like, we can do this quicker, we can do this cheaper, when the reality is they're not seeing the effect that has when it gets to site. I don't know what your experiences are with that and what your point of view is.
I've seen it. So, as an ex-union person and someone who sat in the middle of IR and then moved into labour management, I've seen that. I've seen people beat us to jobs that do it cheaper. But I've always worked for companies where, Matthew Hall. If you look at Matthew Hall and you see electrician did their apprenticeship at Matthew Hall, you know they're going to be brilliant, right? And because the quality of the work was good, and it was always about quality first. It was a massive job near Blackfriars. We didn't win, and we priced it properly. We lost it to another big contractor by 5 million quid on a 30 million pound job. You're like, how can they possibly doing it right? How can they possibly be employing people correctly and looking out for each other? And you see that. And I'm not saying every single project that I've worked on or been responsible for the labour for has been perfect. But it's my ambition is to have the best welfare, the best facilities, the best quality, looking after people. There's a great fella I worked for, Graham Ludlow, and he used to say to me, "We only get paid putting pipes and wires on walls." Like we're an M&E contractor. He was the CEO. He said, "All these people in head office here are pointless unless we put the pipes and wires on wall. So your job, look after those lads and ladies," but there were less of them, and there still are. And that stuck with me. And then when I hear people say, an agency worker is not good enough, let him go. Bang out of order. It's a person. How they're taxed makes no difference to me. I want people to come in, be allowed to do their job, be their best at work. And then when we're coming to, like, when things are built, things are built. So, right, and the next week, as you know, this was a 12-week job. It's turning to 15. Going to need you for another week. Appreciate you might want to go elsewhere, but it is a week. It doesn't happen in our industry.
No,
That winds me up.
I've experienced it before as well. You know, we've got agency site managers in working across like, for various different contractors. You know, you get told on a Thursday, you got to tell that bloke he finishes up tomorrow. And I always just say, I'll say no, I'll tell him that he finishes up next Friday. So he's got a week to sort something out. And they're like, well, no, we just told the board that he's gone because it's costing the job money. And you think he's got a family, got mouths to feed.
I hate that.
And I think you're right. I think the industry as well, that for me, what I've noticed is it's kind of there's a lot of egos in our industry. And I think the problem is that people aren't willing to kind of ever say that, you know, actually hands up, I made a mistake here. Like this is the wrong thing to do. And I think people commit to a decision and there's not enough honest, open conversation in our industry really. And that's something that I've learned through my recovery and sobriety. I think it's that, you know, when you're more open and honest, you create an open and honest environment where people feel safe to speak up. And I think it starts there, doesn't it? It starts with someone putting their hands up on site or someone putting their hands up in the office and saying, yeah, we got that wrong actually. And then it makes other people go, well, you know what? If the leadership and people here are going to talk about the fact that they made a mistake, then maybe I'll feel comfortable talking about something that I've messed up. And it goes back to that responsibility hoarding thing where people just go, I'll hold on to this problem because I don't feel in an environment where it feels safe. And a problem held on to only gets worse and worse, right?
Yeah, isn't it? It's the old thing, isn't it? Problem shared, problem halved, and all that. I've been saying that for hundreds of years. But it's true, isn't it? I think I said something before we started, right? And there was a safety moment in one of the meetings I was in yesterday to do with a pallet truck. And there was lots of conversations about RAMs, whether it was the right machine or a bit of a kit to move the stuff that needed moving. And the person got injured. And it went on this conversation for quite a while. And I'm like, imagine how he feels not getting paid for a few weeks. Well, he's going to get statutory sick pay and industry sick pay. So better than most, but still only about 50% pay if lucky. No one's talking about this. Like, psychological safety, people think is just, am I safe to put my hand up? But what about the impact, the mental health impact of that issue?
100%. I think it's a ripple effect as well, isn't it? So when you think about an incident that happens on site or, you know, something that's happening to someone's mental health, right? So the person that it impacts isn't just them directly, it's their family, it's their friends, it's their work colleagues, it's the people that they're sitting at home, you know, with, who are then having to deal with somebody who's really not in a good place. And I think when you start to think about, like, if you look after your mental health and well-being, the opposite effect that can have. So if you're waking up in the morning and you're a bit more positive, and you know that you're going to a workplace where people care about you, you can practice things like gratitude in the morning, and you can do some of these wellness habits that will have a positive impact. That also is like toxic behavior. Positive behavior also seeps out into every area of your life,
Really
right?
does. Yeah. And I think, um, yeah, going in, it's just good morning, right?
Yeah.
How are you? Rather than bit through the gate, off to the smoking shelter, or wherever you go in the morning. Stop. Morning, Chris. On security. I know the security guards' names. They're really handy because sometimes I forget my past. But you need to spread a bit of joy. Wander around the canteen. Morning. How are we all?
100%. I think it makes the world of difference as well. And I don't think people realize like I said, it's that ripple effect that you can have on people. And don't get me wrong, I think there's obviously days where, the reality is not every day is going to be a positive day. But I think also looking for human nature, and especially in construction, is to look for any negative on a site, right? So, you might have a site visit and you walk around, the site could be immaculate, right? But you'll get the report back which says there was cable ties on the floor in this corner that was just swept up into the floor, or someone was using a brush when we was walking around and they shouldn't have been using a brush. And you go, granted, point taken, but can you see that
Look at the
people,
rest of it.
yeah, or see, maybe that person who's using a brush isn't educated to understand that he shouldn't be, and there's a Hoover around the corner. If you ask that question rather than just having to go at him. And I think it's trying to approach those conversations in the right way. And I think when morale gets down on site, and the team struggle, the whole site struggles, especially if the management are walking around, in a bad way. Then
Yeah.
it's only, the saying, the shit rolls downhill, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Because I think I do. I'm going to tell you about my experience, right? I'm not saying I am the Don when it comes to managing people, but we do as this a thing at across all of our projects. But I'm responsible for Heathrow and HS2 in doing this, right? I meet with the workforce, no supervisors, no managers of all of our supply chain on the site every month, and I sit down and go, "Everyone, all right? Getting a meeting. There's lads off the site. There's workforce off the tools, right? What have you done well since the last time I saw you?" And they go, "Well, the new canteen's quite nice actually, and this new welfare's quite good, and that thing's good, and the new PPE's good." That's it, Stu. Can't think of anything else. Okay, fine. What could we do better? Well, right. And when you started that, well, I started that 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It was 5, 6, 7 pages of notes, not even minutes, right? Just action points. Now I'm lucky to get a page and a half because people feel listened to, people feel seen and heard. Now, it doesn't mean they always get the answer they want, but they get an answer, and that's really important. And you want to see action. You said something about seeing managers walking around, or um, sending an email about the zip ties. Perfect example, that is. There was a bollocking via email that went through 7 people, one of my jobs. I found out about it through that workforce voice meeting. Why is it when I'm sitting waiting for someone to come and do their job so I can do mine, I get an email from my manager that came from his manager, that came from the package manager, that came from the project director, who took a picture out of the window opposite of me sitting down to ask what I was doing.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
So I wrote that down, sent it to the project director and everyone else. I called them all out. We say don't walk by, see it, say it's sorted. You can hear that at Euston on a train, right? What are you doing? Get down, speak to the person. Excuse me, is there any reason why you can't work? Can I help you? I'm the tier 1 contractor. And you know what, they do it now.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right, I had to embarrass them, but
it's the relationship building, isn't it? And that goes back to everything really. And I think this is another thing, supply chain, right? If you're in a main contractor role, without your supply chain, you are nothing, because we don't have, 9 times out of 10, you don't have direct labour. So you've got people there. So if they fail, we all fail. And I remember sitting in a meeting when I was a bit younger, and it was all the supply chain on one side of the table, and then all of the main contractor sort of management on the other side of the table. And one of the older guys walked in, and he sat on the side with the supply chain, and he just did exactly what you said, called everyone out and said, you do realise without these, we're absolutely nothing. You said you can sit over there thinking you're better than, but you ain't. You know better than. You're exactly the same, and without these people, you'll fail.
Another thing I said yesterday was, I asked what percentage of the workforce do you think is employed by you versus via agency, and none of them got it right, and they were all thought there was way more employed directly. Right? I was like, do you know what though? It doesn't matter. What matters is how you treat that individual when they come in. And the three biggest employers on this project aren't in the room, and we're talking about behaviour and culture. It's wrong. Because I know these agencies. I've worked in the agency world for a bit. I've used agencies when I was a tier 2, and now I'm a tier 1. And yeah, there are some shit houses out there, right? As well. There's actually some good ones. Shock horror. Like tier 1 contractors, like everyone in the middle. And I think you can gain a lot by including them as part of the conversation. They can learn, you can learn, and we can all appreciate each other's part to play. The financial funding that an agency provides to a project from the bottom, no one really gets. But actually, if they weren't there the first 5 weeks before the subcontractor got paid, if you're lucky, by the tier 1, the agency's funding the job for labour. No one ever thinks about that. They always go, bloody agencies. You got paid every week for 6 weeks, and no one else did. Yeah, the people who hired you didn't. The main contractor might or might not have done. There's a lot of capex going in at all levels. Anyway, I digress.
No, not at all. No, I think it's important, because I think that is again, it's like what makes that person any different? Nothing really, and it's treating people like people is where you can begin to start to make impact, right?
That is the key. Right? I remember I was in Crossrail. I was an industrial relations consultant working for an agency, and we had a guy called Pat. And we decided we were going to buy full benefits, pay everyone PAYE, because them was the rules. No one wanted it, but that's what they got, right? And Pat come and pat me on the shoulder. He went, you got me booper as part of that credit thing. I was like, yeah. He said, oh, went for my check. I only got bloody prostate cancer. So thanks, mate.
Wow.
I wouldn't have known. I was like, I was just doing it because we should be getting it. That's part of the rules. But actually, that's incredible. And he's all right. He's back in work in no time. And he got sick pay and all that stuff. And treating people right doesn't matter who pays them on a Friday. You're decent in front of that person.
Definitely. I think that's the other thing that people don't really, like I said, just you don't consider what effects your actions can have on that person as well. Like you said, and then that's a prime example. If you hadn't have done that, where would he have ended up? You never know.
You don't. And I think that is, whether it's organising PSA tests on site, which we've done, whether it's doing the Lions Barber Collective things that we've done, whether it's sitting down and having a coffee with someone who clearly looks like they're having a bad day. And if I sit here, everyone, right, okay, you all right? What's it to you? Just asking. But I'm here if you want to chat like I'm just having a brew. Oh, well, I'm having a shit day. Talk about it if you want. They might tell you to do one, right, in whatever language you want to. But you've tried, right? And then eventually they might go, he's all right. I'm going to talk to him again. I like it on this job. Because I think we are away from people moving off for 50p an hour.
Yeah, I mean, the other things, the industry has got a huge problem with, like, the skill gap, isn't there? So you've got a group of sort of people that are coming towards retirement, and then you've got people like me, so I might have worked as a labourer then I did a management apprenticeship. I haven't really got a trade background, right? So, me then being in management, you've got this skill gap where you got guys in their late 50s, early 60s about to leave the industry, and you haven't really got many people coming through. And I think if the industry doesn't kind of change and adapt their way of working, it's not a very attractive for a 17-year-old who wants to be a TikTok star, because they can sit at home and
Or a
make
podcaster.
yeah, exactly. It's trying to make it attractive, and I think if we don't move with the times when it comes to making those things attractive, flexible working, and that kind of thing, I think we're going to struggle to fill that gap. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I completely agree. I think I saw a post today and I jumped on it because we were talking about the skills gap. And are we as an industry really bad at selling the careers? Trades, yeah, 100%. But the whole government is, and I don't blame this government or the last one. Every government. I started this game. I call it a game in 1998, and Labour had just got into power. It's all about education, education, education. Go to uni, don't get a trade.
Mm.
It winds me up, right? Because I don't know a teacher that earns as much as an electrician. I don't know an IR director who earns as much as an electrician, by the way, as well. But I'm going to get slaughtered for that. But I went to Dungeness Power Station with a load of kids from school, and we showed them this amazing nuclear power reactor. And, I'm sure we were all right to take them in. Let's say we were, and it was a shutdown, and all the lads are working outside, and it's mucky. But there's power in Kent, and they're doing this amazing job. And you're like, isn't it exciting? Look at the size of it, the cranes and the big spanners and the welders and the electricians. And you get back on, and the teacher says, if you don't do really well in the exams this week, you're going to end up working. Yeah, that was 1999. I remember it. I won't say the school name, but I remember who was with me, and I couldn't believe it. And I've never left me that story because I'm like, the education system doesn't think this is a worthy career. That's where we need to start, because everyone lives in a house that was built. Everyone goes to a school that was built. Everyone goes to a football stadium to watch a match that was built by people like you and me. The people who sit on teams see the building that we did. And it's like, come on, this is an amazing industry that we should be incredibly proud of. I work for Mace. It is illegal internally, not to mention the Shard, but it is an amazing feat of engineering. So's Tottenham Stadium, so's Wembley, so's the Olympics. Every showcase, the wheel, the Millennium Wheel. Yeah, it's all construction work. These are our workers. These are my colleagues on site. Give them some respect. And I say we don't, we do, me and you, and people who work in our companies outside of that education system. It's not sexy enough. Are we good enough? Probably not. The trade associations, the training bodies talk to each other. We don't go out with that. I've never seen an advert anywhere from a trade association outside of their own trade journals and their LinkedIn posts.
Yeah, and I think the other thing as well is if you're someone like me who probably struggled in school quite a lot, like the education system wasn't great for me. I'm not the best person at sitting down all day and sitting at a computer and tapping away. I had a lot of energy as a young kid, of behavioural problems. People would say, "Oh, he's just a naughty kid," but they put me into a PE class, and then I'd be a star student because I got to run around and use my hands, or in a DT class, design and technology, and I'd be fine because it was the way that my brain worked. And I think there's loads of people that are kind of, failed by the school system. And then if they knew they had that option, they would.
How amazing.
Yeah,
Do you
they might.
remember that bit where you went home and you built a speaker in school and you showed your parents and they're like, well, that's clever.
Yeah.
That's construction. And my son has ADHD, and getting to the prognosis of that is hard. And that's how I realised I did, because I could see in him me at his age, similar to you. By the way, that sounded like my school report you just read out. um, And we learn differently. The education system, having watched my daughter go through GCSE, teaches you how to get through GCSE exams. You don't do a lot of learning the subject for the last year. What's the point? Right? What is the point for people like you and I who are going to go, "Ooh, a badger"? Well, they're telling us, look out the window. Right? What is the point of the system? It doesn't work for everyone. One size does not fit all. We know that in what we do as a trade and as an industry. So why aren't we teaching it from an earlier age? And why don't we say to those young kids in primary school, see Lewis Hamilton there, he's in a Ferrari. He started off with a McLaren. And look at McLaren's office. I'm saying this, right, because I was there when it was being built. Look at this beautiful building. Imagine working in there. Imagine building it.
Well,
You and I have been on that job.
the other thing as well is that when you think about sort of like the life skills that you learn through the industry as well, and the different people that you get to work with is another sort of thing that you kind of take for granted, because like I went straight into construction pretty much from school, right? And I remember having to work with, sort of like I said, a lot older guys, learning from their experience. And it put me in good stead to be able to go and speak to people. Like my friends that kind of went off to uni and did whatever they did, that's fine, because that's what they wanted to do and that worked for them, right? But by the time I was sort of 18, 19, I had already been on site for 2-3 years, and I'd learned loads, and I'd learned how to socialize with various different people, because I was on site talking to these tradesmen who had all this experience, and they were telling me to fuck off, and I was wearing it, and you get used to it. And then I was going back into an office and speaking to a project director who spoke totally differently, or someone who come in a suit. And it's a real good variety, isn't it, that you get throughout your day. And like, there's never any 2 days, especially when you're working on site, there's never any 2 days that are the same. I think,
I agree.
and if your brain doesn't quite work, neurotypically, then it's probably a good sort of space to be working in.
Agree completely. I see a lot of people, and I have a personal interest in neurodiversity and neuro inclusion, and my own diagnosis. But I've friends who are experts in that field, like true experts in employment of people, or trying to get people jobs and keep their jobs, right? Who have things like dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, Tourette's, all that. Right? And our industry is brilliant. There's room for people in our industry. We don't tap that sector very well, because I feel like businesses are scared to say we're looking for people in a neurodiverse field for fear of offending people. But we should just say, come in here, right? We've got this amazing industry, and we'll do an assessment and we'll find where your skills are and where they best fit in our industry. Let's do that before you come in.
Yeah, and that's the thing you do, because you can be sitting in a job thinking, why can't I do this job? But it's because it's not the job that you're supposed to be doing, right? You're supposed to be, like you say, sitting on those skills of like problem solving, because you think differently, and going, oh, actually, have you thought about doing it like that? And everyone goes, no, I never thought about that. And you go, well, it's obvious to me, or to somebody else, and you've got all these different sort of ways of thinking, but they're actually really superpowers, I think.
Yeah. There'll be NDers around the world go, we don't use superpowers as a word anymore. Well, sod off, right? We do, right? Just be inclusive and let people call it whatever they want. It is incredible how you can make the workplace more adaptable if you just think. Right. So I said to you before, I've got ADHD. And while we're talking, now and again, I spot the teddy bear up there, or I spot Frankie's playing, and then I spot Grant's painting. And I'm like, the Collins Dictionary's up there. Well, I don't know, I'm about to move that whilst I'm talking to you, because my head's going off all sorts of places. So I get distracted by things behind me. If I sat with my back against the wall, wouldn't be able to see any of that, wouldn't be distracted. So should I be in the middle of a site looking at drawings, or should I be at the edge of the site looking across the whole site with nothing distracting me? That's a free tip. It doesn't cost anything. That's a reasonable adjustment, right? So there are all sorts of things we can do to help. Get off my soapbox on all that, but I think that's stuff we need to think about for addressing the skills crisis gap which has been there for as long as I've been doing this.
Yeah, it's been the same here, really. But I think that's true, and it's also like I think there needs to be a bit more autonomy in how you do your job nowadays. I think that's one of the other issues is if the work's getting done right and it's getting done safely and it's getting done to the right standards and it's being checked correctly, if somebody like you said needs that space, because I'm the same, so I tune into every single conversation that's going on. If I'm in a busy site office, right, I can't help but hear what's going on over here, and I need some focus time to review some drawings or look at something, and it's like, well, you need to be on site, and it's like, well, I can't do that whilst I'm on site. I need to go away, look at some things, and I think the industry is definitely getting better at that. But what they don't realise is that there's people that are burning out, not necessarily because they're under resourced and because they haven't got enough time in the day to do their job. It's that they're just working in the wrong environment for them. So they're going in feeling like they're just wasting their whole day. They haven't achieved it. They feel like they haven't achieved anything, and then they get to the end of the week and look back and think, what have I done? Obviously, the reality is the job's moved on. There's loads of stuff that's happened, but for them internally, they haven't got that sense of like achievement and purpose, and then they end up burnt out. And I think it's time to just start, like you said, just thinking differently. I think.
Yeah, and people do think differently, and I'm not a tradesperson. I haven't got a well. I worked at Vauxhall and Ellesmere Port, right, and I became a shop steward, building Vauxhall Astras and fixing them as they came off the line broken. Right.
Yeah.
So working class lad from North Wales. What I found I was good at was talking to people, being with people, helping people. More so than I was on a production line. Anyone who worked with me say I was a bit slow. I could drop things, right? Um, but I could see an issue up front way before anyone else. And until I worked for Mace, I would say if I saw someone doing something on site that I didn't think looked right, I would think, well, they must know better than me because they've been doing it for years. So I'll shut up. And then probably the last 5 years, I've thought, just going to ask why they're doing it that way. Worst thing that can happen is they go, fuck off. None of your business. And I go, try again. Or they might teach me something. Or I might just save them from hurting themselves.
One of the best things someone ever told me was people love talking about themselves, right? And they love talking about their jobs. So if you ask, when I was a trainee, I used to say, look, I'm pretty new. I don't understand why you're doing what you're doing. Can you just give me 10 minutes to explain it? And you'd get this guy who ask 10 minutes and it's half an hour later and I've got to go. But I think, like you said, you realise that if you show interest in what someone's doing, and 9 times out of 10, I see a lot of stuff about people don't care. I think initially people might get to a place from repeated behavior that they've watched happen over and over again and then be like, I don't care anymore. But no one goes to work in the morning and thinks, right, how can I mess this up today? Everybody wants to do a good job. I think it's when you start talking to people, you'll realize that. And if you can build that relationship with someone, like you said, every day is a school day, isn't it? You learn something every day.
It is. And I think giving people that space to be genuinely their best is really important. So I want to go back a little bit to your introduction, and you said about, tell us a bit more about what you're doing now with your speaking with the drugs and alcohol stuff. I'm really, really interested in this.
Yeah, so I think, like I said, I'll tell you a little bit about my story, sort of, kind of how I got to where I got to. So, I always remember growing up in a huge Irish family. There was like 15, 16 cousins. My dad was one of six. I remember like alcohol. My earliest memories of alcohol were sitting in a pub garden, and I was drinking like a full fat Coke on tap, a pint of Coke and salt and vinegar crisps. And then my dad and my uncles would all be at the bar, and they'd be sitting there drinking this kind of like golden drink, nectar, and it was like fizzy, it looked lovely. And when my dad drunk that drink and when my uncles drank that drink, they become loving, they become like everything that I was longing for when I was a young boy, I think. I always remember being younger and kind of feeling a bit uncomfortable in my own skin, content, like I kind of didn't really fit in. And then subconsciously I got this thing where I was like, well, maybe when I drink that substance one day when I'm old enough, that will give me that fuzzy warm feeling, and it'll give me that love that I'm longing for. And it did that for my dad. It did that for my uncle. So why wouldn't it do that for me? And I remember the first time I ever drunk. It was in a park. Me and all my friends. So we used to say to all of our mums and dads that we were staying at each other's houses. So I'd say to my friend, say to your mum, sorry, you're staying at my house, and I'll say the same to my mum, and my mum would give me £2 a day to get the bus to school, but I used to walk so that I could save the £2. And by the end of the week, you got a tenner and you think, right, perfect. Right, what can we do? And my friends would do the same thing. So we'd put all our money together on a Friday night and we'd wait for someone to walk past and, excuse me, mate, can you buy us a bottle of vodka? Pack of fags and some ciders, and then you can have a couple as well if you want, and buyer's rights and all that, and that's what we do. And we'd go over to the park, and I remember the first time I drank, I felt there's a saying in recovery about like feeling like you've arrived, and that was exactly the feeling that I got. It was like all of this discontentment, all of this stuff going on in my head, or all of this I'm not good enough. It was like have a sip of this drink and like, whoa, I'm invincible. I can do whatever I want. And I remember I went out that Friday and just got absolutely way too drunk, and all my friends had to ring my parents so say you need to come pick Nick up. So I ruined this lovely arrangement that we had, where it was like we were hiding from our parents, and that started when I was about 14 years old, I'd say. And I think like what I always say is like people's introduction to alcohol in the UK, a lot of people who grew up in the 90s or earlier than that is probably very similar. And I think there's like a real culture around it. And what happened to me was that was my life really, through school, through college, and it was get through the week and start drinking on the weekend. You talk about it all week at school, what we're going to do Friday, and then you get to the weekend, and it was this repeat cycle, right? And that happened. Then I got a job in construction, like I said earlier, working for a company called Clipvine, and that repeat cycle continued. But this time I was now working in the week, so I had more money, I had more availability to go out and do things. And I remember we'd all get paid on a Friday. So me and the labourers that we were working with, and by sort of like Monday morning, we was all asking to borrow money because we'd been to the bookies, we'd done our money, we'd been to the pub all weekend. And one Friday I went out and someone offered me some cocaine, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, it's like, why not? Like, the drinking's not giving me that euphoric feeling that I used to anymore. Like, and it kind of run out. And before that, I would smoke a little bit of weed and maybe do some party drugs, but it was all very, nothing to worry about. I just thought I'm experimenting. I'm just a young guy trying to figure out, what it is that I need. And yeah, and I did this little bit of cocaine, and it was that feeling that I spoke about earlier, but like amplified by like 50. And I was like, wow, this is powerful. Like I feel amazing again. And I remember I always started, and it was all on a Friday night. It was always one, like on a Friday. It was never anything more than that. I'd only ever get one bag. And then, slowly it progressed to like I'd never go out on the weekend without less than 3 on me, and it was always a Friday, then it was a Friday and a Saturday, then it was a Friday, Saturday and a Sunday. And then it started to creep back in the week as well. So it was, on a Thursday night, I'd start going out for drinks. And every time I drank, I say like I couldn't control it. So I'd have one drink, and the minute I had one drink with the pint in this hand, my left hand would slip into my pocket. It would call my dealer, and I would be walking to the cash point before I knew it. And it was something that I couldn't control, right? I don't know why I couldn't get a hold of it no matter what I did. And I guess that kind of progressed for quite a while, really, through the majority of my 20s. And, I worked for various different main contractors. And I remember I used to do a thing, what you call in recovery, it's called a geographical. So you pick up your geographical location and you move, and you think, what you forget is that when you move, all your shit follows you. So I used to go, you know what it is? It's this job and it's all these people that are causing an issue. That's the reason why I can't stop. It's because I'm surrounded by people that are like this. And then I would leave that job and I'd go work somewhere else. And what would happen is that I'd find the exact same people and do the exact same thing, right? Because it was an issue that I had that I never really dealt with. And I moved around within London, and I remember a couple of occasions, kind of like I'd be going out all night and then just using a little bit of cocaine in the morning to keep me going straight to work, working throughout the day, getting to a certain point in the day, and then using cocaine again to pick me up. And there's a couple of occasions where, I wouldn't make it into work, and I remember a couple of times my directors would say to me, you're good at what you do, but you need to get a grip of this thing. Like it's just no good for you. You just got to control it.
Like
And
you had the option to control it, yeah.
yeah, I remember, not knowing what I suffered with at that time and just being like, no, you're right. Yeah, I just need to control it. And I think that happened on a Thursday, for example, and on a Friday, so you come in for a beer and then I'd feel like, well, I have to, so
Yeah.
it's like juxtaposition, right? Anyway, it got to all come to a head and I decided, right, London's the issue. So I'm going to get out of working in London because if I'm in London, it's way too easy accessible. I can get the train. It doesn't matter whether I'm drunk or not. It's fine. I can get drugs pretty much anywhere. It wasn't good for me. So I picked all my stuff up and I moved out of London and I started working for a smaller contractor building industrial sheds, I guess. And I thought, right, this is the fresh start I need. And I got about 4 days clean and sober and I thought, oh, wow, this is cracked it. Yeah, 100%. And, I was working at this company not for very long at all. And I started on the Monday and got to the Thursday and the new director come to site. Well, again, it was a small company, so you get to know people quite quickly. And he said, we need someone to come in Saturday. Like, would you come in and just cover the site? And I said, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I will actually. And in my head, I thought that's brilliant, right? If I'm working Saturday, it means I can't go out Friday night. That's the right thing to do. And I ended up going into work on a Friday and I was like, right, perfect. Yeah, definitely coming in tomorrow. And my boss before I left, you definitely coming in tomorrow? Yeah, 100%. I'll be there. No worries. And as I get in the car, I get a phone call from one of my friends and he's at the local social club, near me. And says, do you fancy coming for a pint? And I thought, you know what? It's been 4 days. I think you know where this is going.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, you know what? It's been 4 days and I deserve it, right? I deserve this. And that's what your brain does when you've got an addictive or addiction issue. It tells you that you deserve to drink and you haven't got a problem. It's the only disease in the world that convinces you don't have it. If you've got any other disease, it tells you all the symptoms are there. Addiction is convincing you constantly you're not an addict. And anyway, I went for a drink and I just lost 4 days. Totally lost 4 days. Wednesday rolled around because I just lost control again. And it was like, I went for the drink on the Friday, didn't go into work on the Saturday, obviously, didn't come home until sort of like Monday morning. And on the Monday morning, just turn my phone on very quickly, text someone, can't come in, not feeling well, the usual shit. And I've done this 1,000 times before, right? Yeah. And I thought, oh, I'd be all right. And I remember my missus just kind of looking at me like, by this point, I've been with her for 7 years now and she's stayed with me through it. And I'm very, very grateful for that. Yeah. But she was like, what are you doing? Like, you need to sort yourself out. So Wednesday rolled around and again, that illness in my brain told me that I could just go back to work on Wednesday and there wouldn't be any issues, right? There's no consequences. Yeah. And when you say it now, it's like absolutely mental. But I went to work on the Monday and there was just a box of all my stuff and obviously, and a note saying, ring me, So I rung my director and he's like, what the hell are you playing at? You've only been at this company for a week. We're terminating your contract immediately. And, I've left out quite a lot of the story because I'm conscious of time, but that years and years in the making. And I really vividly remember just getting in my car and having this box and it was like something out of a movie, right? Like when someone's walking back to the car and it was this rock bottom moment, but you think that probably would have been the moment I decided, enough was enough. But it was, for me, it was like I was in the lowest point of my life. I felt I didn't want to be here anymore. And I just put this opportunity there of getting sacked to just go into self-destruct mode. And I remember it was just sort of 2-3 weeks of just constant using and drinking and going out. And my missus, kicked me out. I was in such a bad way. It got to the 9th of October, 2022. And my brother-in-law rang me and just said, like, come on, mate, what are you doing? And again, he didn't know any other way. He was like, look, we're going for a drink on Sunday, coming for a pint and play some pool or whatever. So I went and met him and I ordered a bottle of Peroni and I only ever order pints normally, right? And on this day, for some reason, I ordered a bottle and I started drinking it. And then I said to him, do you know what? I think I'm going to go, mate. And I was only around the corner from where, I was living with my missus. So I went back to the house and I knocked on the door and she was there and her friend was in the front room crying her eyes out. I was like, what's the matter with you? I said, I've just left my fiance because he's a drug addict and an alcoholic. And I was standing there, right, with a bottle of Peroni, hadn't worked in a couple of weeks now, had no money. by this point, I was stealing things to be able to fund
Yeah.
my habit. I was real, like, sort of everything I said I would never do, I did. I said I would never steal, I'd never lie, I'd never cheat, I'd never do this. I've ticked every box by now, and when you walk into my old house, there's a mirror on the right-hand side and there's a sink on the left. And I looked in the mirror and I saw my eyes and I was like, you're lost, like you're a lost little boy. What has happened to you? Like I'd lost the life in my eyes had drained out of me. I looked an absolute mess. And I turned to the left and I saw the sink and I just, something in me just poured that bottle down the sink and I made a cup of tea and I sat down and I spoke to this girl and she explained how her partner had made her feel. And in that moment, I was looking over to my partner and, I was thinking, God, what have I been doing for all this time? And yeah, I sort of committed to sobriety on that day without realizing. And how I ended up getting into the situation I'm in now was the first 9 months of my sobriety, I tried to white knuckle it, go alone, not having
Yeah.
a community, not do anything. I thought, I can't do this. This is just as miserable as being drunk. Like, this is horrible. And
Yeah.
because everyone was telling how amazing it was, and I was like, it's terrible for me. So in September on 2023, I decided to start a podcast, and I just started speaking to everybody who was sober longer than me and just got all their advice, and I just started applying it to my life. And all of a sudden I was like, oh God, I've realized that actually the reason that I drank and used was nothing to do with a drink. It was all to do with all this internal stuff that I never dealt with. And they say like alcohol wasn't the problem for me, it was the solution to all my problems, right? So the minute you removed it, it was like, that's when my alcoholism's really, really strong, is when I've got no alcohol and no solution. But today I have a solution, and I've learned tools through those people and through 12-step programs. And what I realized was that, the industry is a real bad place for addiction. And I started, speaking to people and just feeling out how they were feeling. And everyone said, oh, I've seen that podcast. And they started saying to me, yeah, I think I might have an issue. I think I might have an issue. And then I realized there was a bit of a need for something within the industry. And like I said at the beginning, I don't know if we were recording at the time, but I was sat in a talk with, I think it might have been the Lighthouse Charity or someone. They were doing great work of what they're doing, amazing. But someone was talking about drugs and alcohol, and it was facts and figures. And I was like, I don't relate to that story. And what saved my life was I listened to a podcast and I related to the person talking.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I can go around to different construction companies or any industry and talk about my lived experience, and it will make somebody think, shit, maybe I've got an issue.
Maybe that's me.
Yeah, that will work. And so that's what I did. And I've started building out these programs. So I've got the Through My Lens, which is a session which I come in and do, and I share my story and I talk about the challenges and some of the things that you can do to look after your mental health and well-being. And then the other one's a Hard Hat Reset, and it's a 12-week program. So for anyone who fails a drug and alcohol test, rather than pushing them onto, another job, and going, that's someone else's problem, I can take them through the 12-step program, which I've been through, which will help them deal with all of their issues and get to the root cause of why they were drinking and using, and actually make a change in that individual's life. So that's
I love that.
That's what I do now.
I think the hard hat reset is something we should explore because, when I said to you earlier, my job's about people and about looking after people. My life is about that, actually. And I've just found a vocation. And, there's other bits too. But do you know what? People do things wrong at I was going to say school then, at work, right? They do it at school as well. The sack's not always very rarely the right option. Or banning them from your site. And I am going against our own policy, actually, by saying that. But I think you should look at each case on its own merits. You would in a disciplinary for someone slapping someone around the face, right? You might look at it and go, well, 5 minutes before, someone berated that person, pushed them around and bullied them. So a slap around the face was the right thing in self-defense. Right. So you have that in that violent nonsense I've just dreamt up there, right? But someone borderline fails a drugs and alcohol test. What good are you doing to the world if you just go, off, don't darken my door again? What good start can I do anyone?
And half the challenge is that, so I did a talk, actually, it was on a Mace site, it's a data center. We did it for William Hares, in May, I think it was, back in May or maybe June. I was on site. There was 40, maybe 50 people in each talk. I delivered 3 talks, and I'd say 50% of each room at the end, I put up a QR code which says, if you need help, scan this QR code, and it takes them to all of my links and some other resources they can use. Honestly, 50% of the room got up and scanned the QR code. And
Wow.
I was really shocked because I didn't think that they'd be so open about it. But also it was the fact that people were like, oh, right, it's normal. You know, they heard me talk about it and they said it's normal. And alcohol and drugs are designed to be addictive, right? That's what they're designed to do. And I'm not anti-alcohol at all, because everybody has their own relationship with alcohol. But what I try to do is I use those experiences. They can be applied to anything in life. Right? So, you know, step one within my journey is admitting that my life's become unmanageable and I'm powerless over alcohol. Right? If that's for someone else, admitting that my mental health's become unmanageable and I'm powerless over my mental health, that's great. You know, you got the second step is trying to find a power greater than yourself or some sort of community that can help you through it. So what I'm saying is the principles that got me sober and clean can be applied to anything. So the hard hat reset can be applied to phone addiction, sex addiction, gambling. It could be applied to work addiction. It could be applied to the fact that your mental health's in a bad state. There's so much that you can get out of it. And I think what I'm trying to do is just open up the door to a different way of recovery from whatever it is. And I think, you know, if we can put those preventative measures in place in the first place and say to people, right, let's go through this process and see what you gain from it. And I'm sure people going through it will gain something, a better understanding of themselves to be able to then make more positive changes, right?
I agree, and I think I can feel it, episode 2 coming on, or next episode of this, right? But it's having those things in place where you can help people be their best. Right? And there's a program for it that will help you. Right? It could be alcohol addiction, could be drug addiction, it could be both. Right? It could be your mental health, it could be being overweight. Right? I'm overweight, but I'm addressing bits at a time. It can be overworking, all those things, like you were saying. We've got a way of doing this. We've got a way of making life better here for your betterment. And I said something yesterday to all of those company owners sat in a room looking at us as their client. You know what? If you lot are happy and your workforce are happy, we're happy. We're going to have a good job. We're going to do a good job here, right? Even when the shit hits the fan, someone's going to happily clean it off, right? Because we're respecting each other. There was a great thing. I'm going to do one thing I've not done on any podcast is look at my phone for a second. And I'm going to tell you why that is, because on my Instagram for this podcast, I posted something the other day. Oh, it's gone. It was spreading kindness. It was about spreading kindness that Johnny had seen at Heathrow Airport. And I was like, this is fabulous. Spread kindness like germs. Something like that, right? It was a poster in a toilet. You know, if you could just let it go and be nice to each other, that's a start. I'm not saying it's the end. You know, and there's a process for making you better. I was dead fortunate last year, and I think am I in a perfect place? No, I think it's a lifelong looking after myself. I've learned I've got to do. All right, so I don't drink every day. Canned cigarettes completely. Um, I tried vaping. That was worse.
Yeah.
That made me sleep. Made my snoring terrible. I'm smiling and reeling it. Smiling in ear, in the eyes.
That's it.
And going through that and having people like you weren't my psychologist, but you could well have been, right? And what you're doing for our industry, is brave, because not many people stand up and do that. And I do know Clipline very well. My relationship was good, very good with them. And I see them doing mental health things on some of our projects now. And I'm not sure whether it's you they're bringing in or whether it's the experience of having you as part of their business. But generally, we need to do more looking after each other. Forget who the employer is. Just be nice to each other. I genuinely do want to do another episode with you, either reciprocal, right? Or just to talk about those bits you're offering. So I can go back and talk to my employer, because I do this for free from my own. This is part of my mental health journey, doing this podcast. And I get to talk to wonderful people like Tom. I don't know if you've seen any of my podcasts, but I'm putting different books up each time. And I want to be able to go back to them and say, I've learned this by doing this in my private life. This is what I think would be amazing for you as a business.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the thing as well. You touched on it there. Is like, you said about spreading kindness and stuff, right? But what you in the middle of the program, which I'm talking about, is where you go back into your life and you unpack a lot of things, right? And you said you're on this journey of your own mental health, and you're right. It's a constant work that never ends. Yeah, but there's processes that you can go through again and again and again. And I do it every day. I sit down at the end of every day and I write, today, have I prayed, meditated? Have I practiced gratitude? Have I grounded? And have I moved? And then I tick them off. And if I haven't, that's fine as well. But I also write, what one of my character defects have showed up today. Have I been selfish? Have I been fearful? Have I been self-seeking? Have I been dishonest? Have I lied? And I go, yeah, actually I have. And then I go, well, who do I owe an apology to? And I sit down and go, well, this person. And, I can put my head on the pillow at the end of every day, go, right, today wasn't great, but what can I learn from it? I can do it again tomorrow. And we're all human. And I think adding some of that human element to work is one of the things that we could probably do a little bit more of. So yeah, that's kind of what I want to do, is bring that human element to construction sites and the workplace everywhere, not just
General.
not just in construction.
Look, we work in a tough industry, not just physically, but mentally taxing. I'm working on one of the projects that no one seems to think is a good idea apart from those that are doing it, right? And I love everything we do in Mace. I think I have opportunities to go elsewhere, but it's a hard industry. And we need to make it easier by just being a bit more supportive. I love what you're doing. I think we can do more of this. We can help each other. I'm sure anyone who listens to it, I don't know how many people are listening at the moment. I'm not that technically savvy to know how many people have listened, right? But I know I'm getting a lot of feedback from people who do like it. So I'm going to be shouting about Nick O'Shea around my clients, my own company. And glad to hear you've been to one of our projects. And we'll do more of it, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I appreciate that. I think it's it's just something that I said as well, something else we need to do is I want to create internally governed communities. I want to go into place, build a community of people that have got a support network, leave and then go, look what you're left with. You've got something here to show. It's not just a case of me coming in and talking and going, thank you, I'll see you later. It's like,
And that conversation
yeah,
finishes.
let's
Trust me, having been the person who books Nick O'Shea to come and do the thing, right? I booked Alliance Barber Collective to come in and do free haircuts. There's one of your former employers is on another part of that project, Skanska, right, over the road, and I could hear the workforce coming around going, "Get Mace job. They're doing haircuts today. Free haircuts. You can get that on our job." Right, but they have a conversation, and they went around the corner and they asked security, "Is that right? They're doing haircuts in there?" Because you know what I like with nosy buggers, right? They're doing free haircuts in there. Yeah, we've got these people, like they're mental health people, but it's a free haircut, and we take it from there. And then people who had a haircut would go, "Well, you'll just have a haircut. I haven't got much to say." Would come out, and one bloke, I will remember this for all my life, and I'm not too macho to say it brought a tear to my eye. He came up with the best thing I've ever had happen to me. And he gave me a massive hug. And he was a guy so we had a textured hair specialist. He had a really tight afro when he come in. He went, "Well, I haven't got an afro comb." Hang on, I'll go and ask him. So I go and ask the bloke, and he goes, "Right, yeah, but I haven't got time." I was like, "Well, I'm the tier one client, right? I'm paying. Sit down, do whatever it is you need to do. We've got a bloke there who's brilliant at this. Enjoy. And you're getting paid." He sat down, he combed it out. I went back in, I was like, "When's the last time you combed that out?" Right? And we had a laugh, and he explained to me, because obviously, right, I don't have a lot of. And he sat down, he had his haircut, he's talking about his life, 6 days a week work, whatever. And he's like, "I get a Sunday off to do my washing and see my family." And I was like, wow, that's why he doesn't get his haircut. But then all of this other stuff come out was really personal to him. And I was like, this is brilliant. For weeks. People still now ask me, when are they coming back? Now, the client on that said job happens to be the government, right? And they don't have a lot of money at the moment, so we can't pay out for all these things.
Yeah.
I think it's short-sighted. But a happy workforce, as I said before, they will be back. We will do it. It's not for a want of trying on our point. And I think also things like you in as a regular guest, definitely
Yeah.
going to do it. Look,
Yeah. Yeah.
I want you to enjoy your Friday. What are you going to do Friday afternoon?
Well,
I know you might have.
I'm editing my own podcast in between doing this one. So I got a couple of episodes coming out. So yeah, I'll do a shameless plug. So there's the Get Sober with Nick podcast you can listen to. It's just about people's lived experience. There's people on there that have quit drinking because if they didn't, they were going to die. There's people on there that quit drinking because of health issues. There's people that still drink, but they've changed their relationship with alcohol, drugs, and all sorts of things. So it's a good, if you want to hear some stories and watch people turn their life around, it's a good place to go. So
I'm going to look for it as soon as we've finished, and you're going to send me the links to it, so we get it in all the descriptors down the bottom as well. And let's do it again, whether it's reciprocating to yours or coming back on here or both, right?
yeah, definitely, yeah. And if anybody's trying to sort of see where they can find me, just Nick O'Shea on LinkedIn. If you go into my bio, there's a link to a landing page which tells you about all the different programs which I run and how you can book me. And yeah, like I said, it's something that I'm really passionate about. So, just reach out if you ever want to talk about it. And that's what I'm here for.
Love it. Well, listen, this is the only place you'll find me. The rest of the time I'm on a mace job. But look, I love this. I love what we're doing. And thank you so much for giving me an hour of your time on a Friday.
No
Really
problem.
appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Really
Oh,
appreciate it.
love it. Thanks, Nick. Have a good
Cheers.
weekend. We'll see you soon.
Cheers.